Karoline Levitt's day began like any other in the fast-paced corridors of Washington, D.C. It was a warm, hazy afternoon, and as sunlight streamed through the high windows of her modern apartment near the White House, she found a moment of rare solitude. At just 27 years old, Karoline was already known as the youngest White House press secretary in history, a title that came with both privilege and pressure. Today, however, was not a day for routine briefings or polished speeches. Today, destiny had another plan. The familiar chime of her phone shattered the stillness. Karoline glanced at the screen. An incoming call from President Trump. With a steady hand and the silver cross on her navy blue blazer, a cherished emblem of her New Hampshire faith, she answered. The president's voice was brisk and urgent. Karoline, we have a situation at the New Haven District Court. A group of devout Christians is suing because they were banned from praying in a public park. I need you on the scene to observe and report back immediately. Without a moment's hesitation, Karoline's mind shifted into crisis mode. She quickly gathered her documents, ensuring everything was in order. Her apartment, immaculate as always, bore silent witness to her unwavering discipline, a reflection of a woman who balanced duty with deep personal conviction. In that instant, the silver cross at her collar wasn't just an accessory. It was a symbol of both her faith and the determination to defend it. The city's streets pulsed with activity as Karoline climbed into her sleek black SUV and merged into the congested traffic of downtown Washington, D.C. NPR's latest broadcast was playing softly on the car's radio, but she switched it off. Her focus honed solely on the task at hand. Every red light, every honk in the cacophony of urban life, became a metronome counting down the moments until she reached the courthouse. Her thoughts wandered briefly to the irony of the moment. Here she was, a high-ranking White House spokesperson, rushing to cover a case about religious expression, a matter so deeply personal yet fiercely political. It was a test of her mettle, one that would challenge not only her professional expertise but also her personal beliefs. As her SUV wound its way through the city's labyrinthine streets, Karoline reviewed the details in her mind. The case was straightforward on paper. A group of Christians, outraged by a new city policy that they claimed infringed on their right to pray in public spaces, had taken legal action. But beneath the surface lay a storm of controversy, pitting constitutional rights against strict interpretations of courtroom decorum, a conflict that resonated far beyond the local level. Arriving at the New Haven District Court, Karoline was greeted by a scene that teetered between order and chaos. The grand, imposing building, with its high ceilings and ornate columns, was a stark reminder of the gravitas of the American justice system. Yet inside, the atmosphere was unexpectedly frenetic. Citizens murmured in hushed tones, their voices mingling with the clatter of keyboards and the rustle of paper as clerks hurried about their duties. Karoline stepped through the glass doors, her presence immediately noted by everyone in the room. She chose a seat in the middle row, placing her document bag neatly on the wooden chair before her. The silver cross on her blazer caught the fluorescent lights, giving it a quiet, almost defiant glow. She knew the significance of that small emblem, both as a personal token of faith and as a statement of the rights enshrined in the Constitution. Across the courtroom, a mix of characters populated the gallery. Among them was a middle-aged man sporting a t-shirt emblazoned with the phrase, "Be the change," and a young woman wearing an oversized, dazzling necklace that seemed to outshine the ambient lighting. Their eyes, curious and perhaps slightly skeptical, flickered towards Karoline as she settled into her seat. The session was about to begin when the courtroom doors swung open, drawing every eye to the figure who commanded the room. A stern, imposing man known as Judge Daniel Stone. With salt and pepper hair neatly combed and wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, Judge Stone exuded authority. His reputation for strict adherence to courtroom decorum was well known, and as he took his seat behind the bench, a hushed silence descended upon the room. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice measured and cold. But as he scanned the room, his eyes locked onto Karoline's subtle display of faith, the small silver cross resting at her collar. His gaze grew sharp, and without missing a beat, he addressed her. "Miss Levitt." Judge Stone's tone was both stern and accusatory. "In this courtroom, Personal expressions of religious belief are not permitted. I must ask you to remove that item immediately. Karoline's heart skipped a beat, but her expression remained calm. Rising slowly from her seat, she stepped forward. Your Honor, I am Karoline Levitt, the White House press secretary, and I assure you my attire, including this cross, is entirely consistent with my rights under the First Amendment. It does not disrupt proceedings here. The judge's eyes narrowed, and with a swift motion, he banged his gavel. That is not the issue, Miss Levitt. The rule here is clear. You are in violation of courtroom decorum. I hereby fine you $500 for contempt of court. A murmur swept through the courtroom as the crowd absorbed his declaration. The man in the changed t-shirt exchanged a knowing look with the woman in the flashy necklace, their expressions mingling surprise and disbelief. Karoline, however, remained composed, her mind racing as she considered the implications of this decision. With the fine announced, silence reigned for a few long moments before the judge's gavel fell again, signaling the continuation of the session. Karoline's pulse pounded in her ears, but she knew that this was more than a simple fine. It was a statement, an attempt to suppress a symbol of faith. Clutching her phone, she discreetly activated its recording function, determined to capture every word, every nuance of this encounter. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. If there is a rule prohibiting religious symbols in the courtroom, I respectfully ask for a specific citation to that rule. I invoke the precedent set in Church of Lukumi Babalu versus City of Hialeah, which upholds the right to religious expression. At her words, the courtroom's murmur grew louder. Phones were raised. Furtive glances were exchanged. In that moment, Karoline transformed from a government spokesperson into a beacon for religious freedom, her calm defiance echoing off the ancient walls of the court. Judge Stone's face reddened, his authority challenged by the facts and the conviction in her tone. Miss Levitt, you are challenging the very order of this courtroom, he snapped. Your actions are not only disrespectful, they are in contempt of this court. Contempt, sir? Karoline's eyes shone with determined fire. If displaying my religious faith is contemptuous, then what of others in this room who choose to wear symbols of their beliefs? Is it not our right to express who we are, as guaranteed by the Constitution? Her words seemed to hang in the air like a gauntlet thrown at the feet of the judge. The crowd in the courtroom buzzed with excitement. Some began to record on their phones, capturing every moment as if they sensed they were witnessing history unfold. On social media, within minutes, the hashtag #CrossInCourt began trending, igniting a wildfire of posts, videos, and heated discussions on platforms like X and Facebook. Outside the courthouse, the digital world was erupting. Tweets, posts, and videos chronicling the confrontation spread like wildfire. Influential voices chimed in, prominent legal analysts, faith leaders, and even political pundits, each offering their own take on the events unfolding inside the courtroom. Karoline's steady demeanor and eloquent invocation of legal precedent struck a chord with many, transforming her into an unexpected symbol of resistance and justice. Back in the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Judge Stone's eyes darted nervously as he attempted to reassert his authority. Miss Levitt, I will not have you use this courtroom as a platform for political or religious propaganda. The fine is final, and you must resume your seat immediately. But Karoline had already stepped closer to the bench, her presence radiating calm authority. Your Honor, she said softly, yet with undeniable force. If my presence and my symbol here are deemed disruptive, then I ask you, what is it about my expression of faith that is truly disruptive? Is it not the voice of the people, the right to speak freely, and the freedom to believe? Her words were a direct challenge not only to the judge but to an entire system that seemed to be tilting against personal expression in the name of order. The courtroom was no longer just a stage for legal proceedings. It had become a battleground for fundamental rights. With a heavy sigh, Judge Stone leaned back, his earlier certainty giving way to uncertainty. His gavel trembled slightly in his hand as he fumbled for words, but the damage was done. The evidence, his own inability to provide a clear written rule, spoke louder than any objection he could raise. As the session continued, Whispers and murmurs of support for Karoline swirled around the room. Several staff members, including the longtime court clerk Mrs. Tran and the respected bailiff Ben Matthews, exchanged glances that spoke of silent dissent. They, too, had witnessed a pattern. Over the past year, countless individuals had been penalized for wearing religious symbols, penalties that, when examined closely, revealed a bias that went far beyond maintaining decorum. Outside the courthouse, the digital uproar intensified. Within hours, #CrossingCourt had amassed tens of thousands of mentions. Videos of Karoline's passionate defense of her rights, captured on mobile phones, went viral. Social media influencers and conservative commentators hailed her as the legal genius who had stood up against judicial overreach, while legal experts debated the implications of her actions. Karoline, meanwhile, retreated to a quiet corner of a nearby parking garage. Her SUV idled as she replayed the day's events in her mind. Her thoughts raced, not with regret, but with a burning determination. This attempt to silence her was not the end. It was a spark that had ignited a broader movement, one that questioned the impartiality of those in power. Back in the courthouse, Judge Stone was reeling from the blow. His decision had not only attracted public scrutiny, but it had also opened the door to an investigation by the D.C. Judicial Council. Within 48 hours, a seasoned investigator named Linda Martinez, with over 2 decades of experience in judicial oversight, began poring over case files. What emerged was a pattern that could no longer be ignored. A significant bias in the fines imposed for religious symbols compared to other minor infractions. Linda's report revealed that in the past year, penalties for wearing crosses or other religious emblems were, on average, twice as severe as those for less significant dress code violations. Moreover, testimonies from clerks and bailiffs suggested that Judge Stone's strict stance was not an isolated incident but part of a broader, troubling trend. The investigation soon garnered national attention. Major news networks picked up the story, and the White House, not one to let a public relations opportunity slip by, quickly backed Karoline. A statement was issued praising her unwavering commitment to the principles of religious freedom and justice. While President Trump himself tweeted, "Karoline Levitt is a true champion of our Constitution. No one can silence faith." In the days that followed, rallies and town hall meetings erupted in cities across America. From Texas to Florida and Ohio, grassroots groups demanded that every courthouse respect the First Amendment, allowing religious symbols as long as they did not disrupt proceedings. Karoline found herself at the center of a movement much larger than she had ever anticipated. Invited to speak at a press conference at the White House, Karoline stood at a podium in the historic briefing room. The room was packed with reporters, legal scholars, and everyday citizens eager to hear her account of the events. Cameras flashed, and microphones captured every word as she recounted the confrontation with Judge Stone. "Yesterday, I was fined for wearing my cross. Not because I was in the wrong, but because someone in authority felt threatened by the very expression of my faith," she declared, her voice steady and resolute. "Today, I stand before you to remind every American that our freedom to express our religious beliefs is not a privilege granted by those in power. It is a right enshrined in our Constitution." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, and social media buzzed with support. The hashtag CrossingCourt had evolved from a local protest to a nationwide symbol of resistance against judicial bias. Every shared video and every retweet amplified the call for change. Karoline's courageous stand had become a rallying cry, a call for every citizen to demand accountability, fairness, and respect for their rights. As the days turned into weeks, new policies began to emerge. The D.C. Judicial Council, under mounting pressure, implemented mandatory First Amendment training for all court staff, including judges. New guidelines were established. No religious symbol would be banned from courtrooms unless there was clear evidence that it disrupted proceedings. This was a monumental step forward, a victory not only for Karoline but for every American who believed in the freedom to express their faith. The transformation was not limited to D.C. In other states, similar reforms were being discussed and enacted. In Texas, the governor personally thanked Karoline for reminding the state of its constitutional obligations. In Florida, Legal aid groups cited the case as a turning point for ensuring equal treatment under the law. Even in Ohio, where court systems had long been resistant to change, local leaders pledged to review their dress code policies in light of Karoline's demonstration of legal prowess. Back at the White House, Karoline received a call from a senior advisor. "Karoline, you did it," the voice said, a mix of pride and relief evident in every syllable. "Your stand in court has opened a door for real change. The media, the people, even some in the judiciary are talking about reform. We need you to prepare a statement for tonight's press conference. They want to know, what's next?" Karoline looked out the window of her office, watching the late afternoon sun dip below the skyline of Pennsylvania Avenue. The silver cross on her blazer gleamed as if lit from within, a beacon of hope and determination. "I'll be ready," she replied, her tone quiet but resolute. "We have to show everyone that faith and freedom go hand in hand." That evening, at the White House briefing room, Karoline addressed an even larger crowd. "Today," she said, "I stand before you not just as the press secretary of the White House, but as a citizen who believes in the promise of our nation. A promise that every individual has the right to express their beliefs openly and without fear of reprisal. Our journey is far from over. We will continue to fight for fairness and equality, ensuring that no one is ever punished simply for wearing a symbol of their faith." The response was electric. Applause filled the room, and across the country, people celebrated a victory that seemed to vindicate the very essence of American liberty. In communities that had long felt marginalized, the case became a source of inspiration, a reminder that one person's courage could spark change in even the most entrenched systems. Karoline's victory, while monumental on a national scale, was deeply personal. She recalled the countless moments in her life when her faith had been a private comfort, a quiet source of strength amid public scrutiny. Today, that same faith was on full display, not as a concession to political correctness, but as a bold affirmation of the right to be oneself. In the days following the press conference, Karoline found herself inundated with messages. Some were from people who had been silenced for too long. Others were from young law students inspired to stand up for what they believed in. One particular message from a young woman named Emily stood out. "Your courage gave me the strength to fight back against injustice. I'm starting a free legal clinic to help those discriminated against for their beliefs. Thank you, Karoline." It was messages like these that fueled Karoline's resolve. Every email, every social media comment, every public endorsement reinforced the truth that her actions had resonated far beyond the walls of a single courthouse. They had ignited a conversation, a movement that challenged systemic biases and called for greater transparency and fairness in the judicial system. Even Judge Stone, once the embodiment of unyielding authority, was forced to reckon with the impact of his actions. In the days after the confrontation, he was summoned to a meeting with the D.C. Judicial Council. Under the scrutinizing eyes of seasoned investigators and legal experts, he was asked to explain the rationale behind his fine and the broader pattern of his decisions. As evidence mounted, it became clear that his approach had been disproportionately harsh toward those who wore religious symbols. Ultimately, Judge Stone was suspended pending a full review, and whispers of reform began to echo throughout the judicial community. The transformation that began in a single courtroom soon rippled across the nation. In smaller towns and big cities alike, ordinary citizens began to question the established norms. Public forums and community gatherings buzzed with discussions on religious freedom and civil rights. News outlets carried stories of similar cases from across the country, accounts of individuals who had been fined or reprimanded for what many considered a harmless display of faith. In each instance, Karoline's case was cited as a turning point, a beacon that illuminated the path to a more inclusive and just system. Across state lines, reform efforts were set in motion. In Texas, where the governor had publicly lauded Karoline's efforts, state legislators introduced bills aimed at protecting the expression of religious beliefs in public institutions. In Florida, a coalition of civil rights organizations joined forces to monitor court proceedings, ensuring that every citizen was treated fairly regardless of their attire. Even in Ohio, where entrenched practices had long resisted change, community leaders rallied for transparency and accountability in the judicial process. The movement was further energized by social media, where the hashtag #CrossInCourt continued to trend. Clips of Karoline's impassioned defense circulated widely, accompanied by heartfelt testimonials from people whose lives had been touched by her stand. One viral video showed a father holding his child in a crowded park, saying, "If my child ever feels ashamed of who they are, I want them to remember that freedom is worth fighting for." Such stories reinforced the idea that this was not just a legal battle. It was a fight for dignity, respect, and the very soul of American democracy. The investigation led by Linda Martinez culminated in a comprehensive report that laid bare the systemic issues plaguing the judicial system. The report's findings were damning. Fines imposed for wearing religious symbols were not only harsher than those for other minor infractions, but were also applied in a manner that disproportionately targeted certain communities. The revelations ignited public outrage, and calls for reform grew louder by the day. In a series of high-profile hearings, legal experts debated the implications of the report. Some argued that strict courtroom decorum was essential for maintaining order, while others contended that the measures in place were being exploited to suppress the expression of individual identity. Amidst the heated debate, one fact remained indisputable. Karoline Levitt's courageous stand had forced a reckoning with practices that many had long accepted without question. Under mounting pressure, the D.C. Judicial Council introduced sweeping changes. New regulations stated unequivocally that religious symbols could not be banned unless they demonstrably disrupted court proceedings. Furthermore, every court official, from judges to clerks, was now required to undergo comprehensive First Amendment training. These measures, designed to ensure fairness and accountability, marked the beginning of a new era in which the rights of every citizen were respected, regardless of their personal beliefs. As the nation began to embrace these changes, Karoline Levitt continued her work with an unwavering sense of purpose. Despite the accolades and public adulation, she remained humble, a dedicated public servant driven by a deep-seated belief in justice. She spent countless hours preparing statements, engaging with legal experts, and participating in community outreach programs aimed at educating citizens about their rights. One evening, as Karoline sat in her office overlooking the bustling streets of Washington, D.C., she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had unfolded in such a short time. In her hand, she held a framed copy of the $500 fine, a tangible reminder of the day that had sparked a national conversation about fairness, accountability, and the right to express one's faith. What had once been a symbol of repression was now a banner of resistance, a testament to the power of one individual to ignite change. In a private moment, Karoline confided in a close colleague, "I never imagined that my cross, something so personal and quiet, would become a symbol of so much hope. But today, I see that even the smallest act of defiance can light the way for millions." Her words were met with a gentle nod of agreement, a silent acknowledgement that the battle for justice was far from over. Yet, as the digital and real-world communities rallied behind her, Karoline knew that her journey had just begun. With every conversation, every rally, and every reform instituted, a new chapter was written in the ongoing struggle for civil rights in America. 3 months after that fateful day in the New Haven District Court, Karoline Levitt found herself standing at a podium in the White House briefing room, addressing a sea of reporters, activists, and citizens from all walks of life. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the energy of a movement that had swept the nation. 3 months ago, Karoline began, her voice echoing through the room, "I stood in a courtroom, fined for expressing my faith with a simple cross. That day, I did not just defend my right to wear it, I defended the rights of every American to be who they are. Today, we stand at the threshold of a new era. An era where freedom is not just an ideal, but a living, breathing reality for every citizen." The room erupted in applause. In that moment, the silver cross on her navy blazer was more than an accessory. It was a symbol of resilience, courage, and hope. Across the country, people from all walks of life began to see themselves in Karoline's story. A story that proved that even in the face of entrenched authority, the voice of the people could prevail. Her story would be told for generations, not merely as a tale of legal victory, but as a reminder that the fight for freedom is ongoing, and that every individual has the power to challenge injustice. And as the applause subsided, Karoline knew that her journey, her mission to safeguard the rights enshrined in the Constitution, would continue, fueled by the enduring belief that justice, when pursued with passion and integrity, has the power to change the world.